It's about time I talk about what I believe to be the best Sonic game we've gotten in so long. Words can't describe the enjoyment I had playing it. Having the experience of playing it firsthand after watching people play it themselves over the past couple of months, whether it was early demos or early reviewers. Maybe one day I can review a copy early, but I doubt it considering how long I take to put these videos together. It was indeed something. Aside from Sonic Origins, if you even count that as a release, fans have been grasping for another Sonic game since Forces. Despite whatever opinion you might have on that game, the people overall were just begging to see the next installment to the series be good at most. Think to yourself, what attracts you to the franchise? The adventure formula? The boost formula? What connects you to this character? And now, it's finally here. Guys, Sonic Frontiers delivered. Let's get on to this masterpiece of a game that has set the premise of a potentially great future for this series moving forward that Sega finally put out this year. I know I opened up with a pretty strong remark at the beginning of this video, and it's always dangerous territory when talking about Sonic opinions online, but that's with almost every franchise, so what else is new? I'm a proud Sonic fan. Sonic Heroes was the first game that introduced me to the series, and I loved it despite whatever you think of it. But what I hope to see for the fandom moving forward is the ability to actually listen and be respectful of other people's opinions, and yes, I mean, that would take a miracle to take. You don't have to make that obvious, Mr. Einstein. But the common misconception is that not everyone's going to have the same mindset as you, and I sincerely appreciate those in the comment section that didn't harass others for leaving their thoughts in the last time I talked about Sonic. So if we can keep that up, that would be great. Frontiers. As some of you know, I've been defending this game since day one. I had a strong sense of copium with this, and that would indeed be the push for the franchise needed to finally articulate a formula for the Sonic team to follow in order to continue the journey of our blue hedgehog friend. I'm talking about the open world aspect of this game. Now, despite what you think of open world, yes, I can agree that it's been inspired for many different types of games, but in the case of Frontiers, I'm actually shocked that it actually ended up working out. It was probably the #1 biggest concern among consumers to see if the concept can even fit for Sonic. It worked well for the most part. The only thing I saw that many others noticed were the pop-ins. I'm still seeing people making comments on how there's hardly anything in the world as you're running around, and I respectfully disagree with that take. Given the context of the game where you're on an uninhabited island full of Cocos, then yeah, you really shouldn't be expecting a lot of NPC interactions and not really much other things other than the environment of an island and what there is to it. As I've mentioned before, they seem to have added so much more detail in making the environment look lively, and it turned out to be true. I'm sure many of us can agree that this was a significant amount of improvement since the first showcase of the game. While in the overworld there are many different things that you can do to obtain a 100% completion, there are some obstacles that you can go through to achieve certain objectives, and while doing so, depending on the obstacle you're going through, the camera sometimes automatically steers your directional view, which then causes you to lose control over it, and it ruins your momentum, and then you become stuck in a 2D-like scenario until you find a way out of it. Yes, this part was a pretty annoying aspect to the game, and especially when trying to reach a certain point on the map. There's also a minion in the game that also takes control of the camera angles and forces you to look up in the air. That was probably my only complaint in the overworld though. Sonic controls well, and I mean extremely well. I had zero issues with Sonic not going in the direction I wanted him to go to as I was exploring. The only time where I sometimes ran into a problem was in the cyberspace levels, where once you've committed to executing a jump command and you go past something like a red ring, for example, and you want to steer back and go get it while still in the jump, then consider it a lost cause. Maneuvering in the cyberspace levels was a tad bit difficult, but it wasn't game breaking. At least for PC users, the physics of that aspect is improved thanks to the modding community. On the topic of cyberspace levels, I was pretty surprised that there were only about 4 to 5 revisited areas during Sonic's times of adventuring, and I was expecting more out of it, but in reality they were just different versions of the same areas, like Green Hills for example. I understand the discourse of people becoming sick and tired of revisited levels and games. I'm in the same boat. However, if it's not part of the main game, then what exactly is the issue here? Again, sure, they could have made a lot more different revisited levels like Crisis City, Planet Wisp, and more, but at the end of the day, they were optional to complete and aren't the focus of the game. As I've mentioned before in my last video, the game most likely would want to satisfy the types of players there are, especially in the realm of Sonic gaming. The open world players and the high-speed generations like players are also trying to be fulfilled here. Now, given that the boost formula was also removed and replaced with a different kind of boost, it wasn't exactly like a Generation/Unleashed experience, but I guess a new introduction of how Sonic will play out for future games. I still found them to be pretty fun, simple, and straight to the point, while the red rings are right in front of your face to collect. And speaking of fun, can we talk about peak Sonic boss fights? Over the course of time, the fights are action-packed, your adrenaline starts to rush, and you're in the zone. Especially when you go Super Sonic. Now, canonically, Super Sonic is a very powerful being, so when it's saved for a final fight, then you know it's about to go down. It's definitely one of the most iconic moments of gaming, so capitalizing on such a thing is for sure something that you always need to implement in Sonic games, in my opinion. Now, in comes Frontiers, and holy smokes, they actually go brazy with it. Super Sonic for the first time becomes an actual necessity for Sonic to utilize to take down the Titan bosses, coming down to the realization that his strength alone, it just wasn't enough. Let me tell you, when this man came down with his arms folded with a smirk at the end while the music builds up in the background, like, you can't tell me that you didn't feel any goosebumps with that. They really stepped their game up with this one this time around. The music filling up the atmosphere with pure epicness while you go ham on the Titans. You're utilizing all the abilities you unlocked, and now you're putting it all to good use. What caught me off guard was the implementation of QuickTime events, having to press a button command to initiate a sequence of events for the fight. It really keeps you on your toes, and you're not sitting back watching everything unfold. Despite the boss fights feeling like an actual movie, I haven't had this much enjoyment and engagement with them in so long. It makes me wonder what they will do to step it up in the next game. The only disappointment in these fights I felt was the final boss. It wasn't really too challenging and was ridiculously easy for where you would be in the game. I was expecting the difficulty to skyrocket, but I was sadly mistaken. It's ironic that the first Titan felt more of a final boss than in reality when it was actually the first one. But that's not to say that the others didn't feel that way either. Overall, super awesome fights, and I loved the finishing blows on all of them. Makes you remember how Sonic is quick to think in dire situations to get the job done. Definitely one of the more memorable boss fights throughout the entirety of the franchise, and I hope they can step it up to that level and possibly go beyond for whichever title is next in line. The story in this game felt safe, if anything. It was something not to really look at and be amazed by, but I think it was a matter of looking at it as a way of fixing the consistency in storytelling for these games. Like in Sonic Forces, for example, if Shadow was the reason Infinite became what he was, then why exactly is he going after Sonic? Now, I had my fair share of problems with the story of Forces, but that's besides the point. The story in Frontiers was basic, easy to follow, and consistent. It was interesting to see how the Cocos came to be and how the characters in the game interacted with them, while also learning about them and what the past was like. Ian Flynn did a good job of that, and I'm glad we went down the route of making Super Sonic a part of the story now. It was a shame to see that the form would be locked behind DLC or used outside of the main story from previous titles. I love the character development that we saw as well. It goes to show how much Sonic cares for his friends, and we also have voice lines in the game referencing past characters in the franchise too, which was awesome to see, and not even just the characters themselves, but also past places Sonic has visited. The continuity is something I can appreciate, and it makes me happy to see everything tie in together. To me, it's important because it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the consistency of storytelling. I think something good might be cooking up for the next Sonic game in terms of story, but only time will tell, huh? But with that, that's where this video is going to come to its conclusion. Let me know what you thought of Frontiers, and please be respectful of one another in the comments. I'd love to hear your takes. I truly believe Sonic is being steered in the right direction moving forward, and I cannot wait to see what unfolds next for the future for this franchise.